You wake up in a white room with nothing but tissues, a computer, a cat, and a door. You go through the door and find yourself being assaulted by 3 children in pajamas. These abominations invite you to a picnic. When you arrive, you meet a girl with green hair and a flower crown. Soon you learn this girl is actually a boy named Basil. You decide to make the trip to Basil's house, but he manages to get kidnapped in a game of hide and seek and requires you and the gang to save him. After the hostage crisis is taken care of, you make your way to his home and find Basil's garden along the way, where each plant represents a member of his friend group. Sunflowers for Basil because he sees the bright side of things. Lily of the Valley for Mari because she helps people see a brighter future. Roses for Hero because of his admiration, passion, and friendship. Gladiolas for Aubrey because she is honest and true to herself. Cactuses for Kel because they're brain dead. And white tulips represent Omori because Basil thinks they're cute. Eventually you get to his house, which seems to be based off one of their friends' shoes in real life. You help him put his photo album back together after Aubrey and Kel knock some pictures out, and then Basil remembers that murder he covered up that one time and suddenly disappears, beginning the story of Omori. Now, who is Basil? What does he want? And why is he so important to Sunny? That's what we'll find out tonight on Unsolved Mysteries. Before beginning this video, know that there will be spoilers, so if you don't want to know what happens in Omori, don't watch this video. Basil's birthday is canonically February 18th, making him an Aquarius, which is incredible because I'm also an Aquarius, and this really shows in no way at all because zodiac signs are fucking stupid and meaningless, and somehow I've become the only asshole I know who isn't completely devoted to this bullshit. Anyway, Basil lived with his grandmother since he was a toddler as his parents traveled for work outside of the country, and 2 years before the game starts, his parents hired a caretaker named Polly to take care of Basil and his grandmother. Now the fan wiki seems to imply that his parents don't care about him, which is why they left him with his grandmother, but some people travel for work and it's not because they hate their kids. Sometimes they travel to dangerous places even, and they don't want to uproot their entire lives every time they're moved to a new country or expose their kids to possible harm. With that being said, Basil does seem to have anxiety over being perceived as a burden, which may stem from his parents not taking him along on their trips. In the Omori subreddit, people speculated that Basil may be of Greek descent, which makes sense. And with me being Turkish, well, let's just say I'm going back to sleep. Have fun in the afterlife, Basil Yapadopoulos. Tell Mari I said my bad. Basil was introduced to Sunny's friend group by Aubrey and quickly grew a close bond with Sunny, as he notes that they need to take care of Sunny since he was the youngest of the group, and when Sunny is buried in sand, Basil stays with him just to make sure he's okay. His friends also care for him and are supportive of his hobby for photography as they buy him film and a photo album on his birthday. Basil has a preference for photographing people when they weren't expecting it, so the pictures would be as natural as possible, and captures many of the group's childhood memories this way. He fills a photo album with these pictures, and that photo album becomes key in the game's story. He also gains his iconic flower crown from his friends telling him that it really suits him, though in the real world, Basil sells for just a single flower, which also represents his passion for gardening. Personality-wise, Basil has a large change in the game, but initially he is a positive and happy, if slightly timid kid who cherishes his friends deeply, which really shows in him struggling to find something to wish for on his birthday since, as he states, "I have everything I could want right here." Aww. However, his life got flipped upside down when on the day of Sunny and Mari's recital, he comes over to their house and witnesses an argument between Mari and Sunny that turns deadly when Sunny pushes Mari down the stairs, accidentally killing her. Sunny is totally destroyed by this and is inconsolable, but Basil pulls the biggest homie move and helps Sunny cover it up by staging it as a suicide by hanging. Now, that wasn't the smartest move since there would be other injuries on her body that cannot be explained by asphyxiation that the cops would notice immediately. The smart thing to do would have been to put her body back at the bottom of the stairs and say she slipped. Fucking noobs. That's why your parents didn't take you to Somalia on their work trip. This event results in Basil becoming racked with guilt, and he becomes more reclusive and significantly more timid than he already was. Like Sunny, he is also haunted by the something, which he blames for Mari's death, refusing to believe that Sunny could be capable of such a thing. Sunny also goes into the photo album and blacks out all of the faces of his friends with with marker, which Basil also blames on this something. One day at school, Aubrey sees Basil sitting by himself during lunch and begs him to study with her, which he reluctantly agrees to. They go to Basil's house, and he ends up leaving Aubrey alone in his room, where she discovers the desecrated photos and ends up resenting Basil from that day on, bullying him, calling him a creep, which the hooligans also join in on, yet Basil still refuses to reveal the true culprit of the vandalism. If the player takes a Hikikomori route, then Basil will succumb to his guilt and commit suicide, which is evident from the sirens you hear during the end credits. But in the true route, Sonny finally leaves his house with Kel after 4 years of being shut in and sees Basil asking him to get Aubrey to give his photo album back, which Aubrey refuses to do. Sonny and Kel eventually do get the photo album back and give it to Basil, who discovers that the photos have been restored by Aubrey and then gives the album to Sonny, expressing his wish that things would go back to the way they were before Mari's death. Later on, Aubrey runs into Basil at the lake they all used to hang out at, which results in a fight between Sonny and Kel against Aubrey and the hooligans, who run away after Sonny pepper sprays them, except for Aubrey, who accidentally pushes Basil into the lake out of rage, despite Basil not being able to swim. Sonny jumps in to save him, but he doesn't know how to swim either, so all he accomplishes is turning one drowning kid into two. Luckily, Hiro shows up in the nick of time and saves both of them. In Sonny's dream world, Basil still has the personality he had before Mari's death, but Basil also exists in Sonny's dreams in the form of a shadow in the shape of Basil called the Stranger, who tries to help Sonny confront the truth about his sister's death, a memory Sonny has buried away. The Stranger is relevant to a flower that Basil leaves around called a white egret orchid, which, in the language of flowers, symbolizes the phrase, "My thoughts will follow you into your dreams." And if anybody's wondering, this is only an Omori. It doesn't actually symbolize that in real life. Trust me, I spent a whole 30 seconds on Google researching this, so I know what I'm talking about. Basil also leaves this flower on Mari's grave, showing that despite his actions covering up her death, he still mourned for her. By the way, in a comic made by Omocat about Aubrey, they show Mari's grave and the name on it is literally just Mari, like she doesn't have a last name. It reminds me of that scene in Sopranos when they mess up the headstone.
Joseph, and we commit his body to its resting place.
Peeps? It's a fucking nickname. Family name is Pepperelli. They're gonna redo it. Fucking Jason. He's dyslexic. What's that got to do with it?
The Stranger and Sonny's dream Basil come into conflict with each other as Sonny feels he needs to save his dream version of Basil, while the Stranger wants Sonny to save the real world Basil, and whether you do the Hikikomori route or the true route determines which one he saves. Dream Basil's disappearance at the start of the game shows that Basil is a constant reminder to Sonny of the memory he is trying to forget, but Basil still works within Sonny to bring him back to reality and finally come to terms with what he's done. There's also this long section after you collect all the hangman keys where you go to the black space and Basil constantly tries to remind you of the truth but gets his shit kicked in every time he's just about to. And I'm sorry, but I found the scene where they're on the boat unintentionally hilarious. Sonny and Basil are just cruising on the boat, they go into a tunnel, and when they come out, Basil just has no head. So Sonny's just cruising on this ship with a headless Basil, chilling.
Are you fucking crazy?
By the way, if it isn't obvious yet, I was watching Sopranos while doing my playthrough to gather footage for this video.
I really went downhill after the World Trade Center. You know, Quasimodo predicted all this.
What?
Who did what?
All these problems, the Middle East, the end of the world.
Nostradamus. Quasimodo's the hunchback of Notre Dame.
All right. Notre Dame.
Nostradamus and Notre Dame. It's two different things completely.
Basil is Sonny's closest friend, and Sonny knows deep down that for the sake of both Basil and himself, that he needs to face the truth to save both of them. And so the drive to face the truth comes in the form of Basil. Basil also asks Sonny for forgiveness in the dream, since in a way, Basil also feels guilty about helping cover up Sonny's actions because it puts Sonny in a horrible state of depression and repression. Back in the real world, the group drops Basil off at his house, and when they come back later, they learn that Basil has gone to the hospital with his grandmother, who has been rushed to the ER after choking on some gabagool. The gang spends the night at Basil's, where in the twist Quasimodo himself couldn't have predicted, you learn that Sonny actually killed his sister, and it wasn't really a suicide. Basil's grandmother would pass away that day, which ends up being the tipping point for Basil, who ends up attempting to kill himself, but Sonny steps in and the two end up fighting, leading to both of them being sent to the hospital. While in the hospital, Sonny confronts Omori, and in one of the Cherish moves, is given strength by Basil's wish that everything would go back to the way they were before. Sonny finally overcomes his guilt and confesses to his friends the truth of what happened to Mari. In the secret ending, which you get by searching it on YouTube, Sonny is seen smiling warmly at Basil, and both of their somethings disappear, no longer having to live in constant guilt. Now, I wanted to make this video on Basil because I find him a very compelling character, how such a positive and sweet kid ends up experiencing trauma, and the way he reacts to and copes with this is very fascinating to me. But mainly I like that the developers inadvertently made him kind of a G. First, he basically has to find his own way growing up since his parents aren't around since he was a toddler, and when Sonny kills Mari, he helps him cover it up. It's like that question you ask your friend to see how good of a friend they are, if they would help you get rid of a body. Well, Basil basically does that for Sonny. Not only that, but he keeps his mouth shut about it for 4 years and is literally about to take it to his grave. He also keeps his mouth shut about Sonny messing with the pictures despite the relentless bullying he endures because of it, and keeps quiet about Sonny's crush for Aubrey. They say 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead, so that's a very strong characteristic to give Basil. And despite Basil being the biggest pussy in Sonny's dream world, Basil ends up making Sonny look like fucking King Tut after the 2 square up, while Basil only has a few scratches. Now, of course, these things take an immense toll on Basil. Basil ends up losing his happy life and is put in a state of severe depression to the point where he is ready to commit suicide, and is finally given the peace he desperately needed when Sonny confesses the truth about Mari, and the 2 can finally go back to being friends and argue for years over who actually won that night. One more day, the sun reaches my bed. One more day to spend alone again. Quasimodo predicted all of this. Who did what? The end of the world and all of this. No, that was Nostradamus. Quasimodo was the hunchback of Notre Dame. Right, Nostradamus. Nostradamus, Notre Dame. 2 different things completely. Peeps was a nickname, his real name was Pepperelli.